It's time for Voice of Indie. Your hosts today are Beem Weeks, author, producer, and marketing monster for independent multimedia publisher Fresh Ink Group, and Stephen Gies, author, producer, composer, and publisher for Fresh Ink Group.
Happy Wednesday. Happy Hump Day, everybody. Welcome to the Voice of Indie podcast, episode number 93, inching closer and closer to that 100th episode. I am your host, Beem Weeks, and with me tonight is Mr. Stephen Gies, my co-host. How are you doing tonight, Stephen?
I am doing nifty. I'm just happy to be here. It's turtle time in Alabama, out here by the lake, meaning the turtles are all coming up out of the lake, coming up through the yard and heading for the woods across the cul-de-sac so that they can dig holes and lay eggs, which means in a couple of weeks it's turtle time again because we're going to have a whole bunch of little baby turtles all heading back toward the lake. It's a fun time of year. It's turtle time in Alabama.
Turtle time.
When I look out the window and I see those big old dinner plate-sized turtles lumbering up through the yard, I picture a food truck. You like that segue?
I like the tie-in.
How to Start and Run Your Own Food Truck Business in Florida by A.K. Winkler is out tomorrow, officially out tomorrow. So if you've been placing your orders in the pre-sale, your delivery should, if it's a print, it should be shipped out tomorrow. If it's digital, you should receive your copy sometime during the night tonight, I would think. So if you haven't already ordered your copy, get out there and order it. And keep in mind that we're working on launching a whole series with Ms. Winkler and putting up a website and getting real busy on this whole food truck industry.
Yeah, we are actually working on a website and a blog, and this is set to promote as she releases, as Stephen said, it's going to be a series of books as she releases those. We'll be putting those up on her website, and she'll be writing about it on her blog. This is a cool book, so get over to Amazon and grab your copy because the food trucks are the happening thing right now. And she lays it all out on what you need to do. This first book is for Florida, but it does cover food trucks in general. The Florida angle is, the legal stuff that permits and all that stuff down there that you need. But it's still a good book to get you started on your way to a food truck. But listeners, if you want to call in tonight or leave a comment or a question on Twitter for tonight's guest, this is how you do that.
Call 516-453-9902 right now with your questions or comments for tonight's guest, or post a note on Twitter with hashtag Fresh Ink Group in the body of the tweet and we'll read it on air. That's 516-453-9902 or hashtag Fresh Ink Group on Twitter.
We want to hear from you.
We do. He's telling the truth. So I logged in and took a look to see what kind of print bestsellers we've got going right now. There's not a big change from last week. The first two slots, again, Eerie Charms of the Short Story, Fantasy, Mystery, and Horror by Patricia A. Guthrie. And do you endorse that book, Beem?
Yes, I do. That is a fantastic book. I edited it, so I'm a little partial to it. But I'm telling you, Patricia A. Guthrie is a master storyteller. Her short stories are phenomenal. She's got this great imagination, and she's just a fine writer. So go over and grab your copy.
In the number 3 slot, How to Start and Run Your Own Food Truck Business in Florida. So the pre-sales ran some numbers up there on the print editions. The 4th slot, The Rise and Fall of a Construction Giant, The History, People, and Stories of CFW Construction. This one continues to intrigue and perplex me. And then finally, Hello, Chattanooga, Famous People Who Have Visited the Tennessee Valley by newscaster and media personality David Carroll in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area. It's a fine book. You endorse that one, Beem?
I endorse that. I did some work on that, too. And that's just a cool book right there because it's loaded. It doesn't matter what kind of music or entertainment you're into. If somebody you're a fan of visited Chattanooga, they're in there, and usually with a picture. And so it's really cool. And it goes way back to the turn of the last century, the old vaudeville days, all the way through to modern rock concerts, country concerts, orchestra, movie stars, sports heroes, and just a whole bunch of them. Now, we just mentioned Eerie Charms of the Short Story. As Stephen just said, all editions are out. all of these books have trailers, so get over to YouTube and check out the Fresh Ink Group channel, where you're going to find episodes of this show on there as well. Book trailers, the archive of the Voice of Indie podcast. And while you're over there, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. This really helps us out. And as I say every week, we're really trying to build something here. And while you're at it, go over to the Fresh Ink Group website and check out how you can sign up for our newsletter. And here's a little more on that.
Stay on top of these podcasts and all things Fresh Ink Group with our weekly digital newsletter, new releases, videos, stories, excerpts, interviews, and more. Sign up now on the homepage of freshinkgroup.com and be the one who knows what's what.
What?
So we've got a shout out here for Fresh Ink Group authors in particular, but it could be any authors who are interested in having some help with their social media. We've got a young marketing guy on the staff at Fresh Ink Group, Sam, recently turned 18. We're proud of him. He's a college student and out there doing good things for such a young man already. He does a lot of our marketing stuff. He posts a lot of social media and puts together different postings and stories and things like that as well. As he talks to our various authors, he's finding that occasionally people are saying, well, I really would like to have, an Insta-Facegram, or a tick book, or something like that, but I don't know how to do it. So he works with people. He'll walk you through it. He'll help you set up the account. He'll give you some pointers on how to put your postings up there and basically look over your shoulder and help out to get you going. So, Sam at freshinkgroup.com. Send him a note or use the contact form at freshinkgroup.com and send us a note. Although if you're a Fresh Ink Group author, you've probably got several phone numbers and email addresses that you can pester us with. But authors, if you want some help with your social media, you want to expand, you want to try a new platform, you want to try some new techniques, Sam is your guy to help.
Indeed, and he's a young guy, so he's one of the hip kids these days. Unlike us oldsters, yeah.
23 skidoo.
Yeah, 23 skidoo. I remember that back in the 1920s. Now, as I stated, we're trying to grow this podcast. So listeners, if there are other podcasts you know about and that we should follow with, and we're trying to network with several of them as well. We've got a couple already lined up that we share guests. We've got a good guest, we'll send them over there, and they've got a good guest, they send them over here. So if you're familiar with any kind of podcast dealing with entertainment, it could be music or writing, whatever, let us know about it. You can send me an email at beem@freshinkgroup.com, and we'll try to make some kind of connection there. Starting this network, that's how you grow things. And speaking of this podcast, if you missed an episode or you want to revisit one that you liked, that you heard from before, even if it was a year ago, year and a half ago, we've got an archive. And here's how you can listen to all those old episodes in the archive.
If you miss a show, find us in the archive in the Fresh Ink Group channel on YouTube, on Spotify, or under the podcast tab at freshinkgroup.com, beamweeks.com, and stephengs.com. On YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe.
All right.
Yeah, had a couple of more subscribers on there the last time I looked. I got giddy, got up, danced a little jig, hurt my back, had to sit back down again, but at least it was fun for a minute. Today's guest, Andre Gress, goes by the writer name A.G. Flitcher. He's been writing for the last 9 years. He's done everything from screenplays and novels, poetry, research articles, to journalistic articles. Over time, he wanted his writing to be focused on how the human spirit is tested, whether it causes positive or negative change in characters or readers. So he has a bachelor's degree in creative writing from Kwantlen Polytechnic University, which helped him build his foundation as a writer and gave back his love of reading that he had lost for so long. I'm curious why he lost that. However, my education is not what made me the writer, not made him the writer he is today. It's life, his perseverance, the value he sees in himself, and the value others see in him. So welcome to the show, A.G. Flitcher.
Welcome, Andre.
Hello.
So how about we get started with where are you from? Where are you originally from? Where have you lived? And where are you now?
I was born in Vancouver, BC, Canada, and then my family and I moved down to the more suburban area of the mainland called Aldergrove, which was it used to be nicknamed Alderhole because it was rather trashy in the past. There was a lot of old buildings and old hotels, which was actually a little sketchy because there was some bit of a brothel down there.
Ooh,
kind of a.
Well, it was hard to tell. Like sometimes when my sister and I were going to a video store to rent a DVD or something, we would actually see sex workers hanging out in the back.
Ah.
Yeah, and of course
Sketchy
it was
indeed.
very rare to see that. Yeah, and then out of nowhere they just kind of disappeared. I guess someone's like, maybe we should change the image of this little village here. So now it's not there anymore. The whole Alder Inn hotel and restaurant that used to be there that had this in the backside of the building got demolished and replaced by a little sort of like concrete garden.
That's interesting.
So that's where I am now.
Back in the day, back in the 70s and the 80s, I'm in Michigan, in the capital city, Lansing. I lived right just outside of the capital city. But in the 70s and the 80s, our downtown area was like that. It was just, it was all kinds of sex shops, video shops, just really seedy. And it was right in the shadows of the state capitol. And it was just a bad image. But they eventually, developers bought up all those buildings, knocked them down, and we've got a baseball stadium downtown now, a convention center, hotel, and a lot of nice restaurants and apartments, brand new apartment complexes. Yeah, so they, cleaned up the downtown, and it looks a lot better.
Yeah, it's kind of what they're trying to do to Aldergrove is that they're slowly chipping away at the old image and changing it to a more modern look, a bit more like modern urban city kind of feel. So there's this old strip mall which was supposed to be torn down like 5 years ago, but there's so many discrepancies as to what they're allowed to do because it's kind of close to fishing areas. So they had to be careful with all of the permits and whatnot that they are allowed to do. So now they're finalizing everything and have put up signs saying that they are in progress of demolishing and doing all these steps for future development.
Okay.
No, over on Twitter, we've got some show announcements, welcome, all that kind of stuff from Marlena Smith, Verwayne Greenhoe. Joe Conjal says it's showtime. Good evening, everyone. And then Joe Conjal has a question for you, AG. Says, hi, AG. With all the different types of writing you have explored, which do you prefer and why? Novels, poetry, research articles, or something else? Thank you.
Well, it's kind of an interesting question because my trial and error journey to where I am now started as a screenwriter, which is what I did for a couple of years. But mainly fiction novels, that is my preference because there's something about having something concrete that belongs to you that can't be altered unless you decide to do like a second edition or more illustration in your book. But other than that, the manuscript is set in stone, which is kind of why I stepped away from doing screenwriting, not just the competition, but also knowing that it's easy to steal something like that and make it, not yours anymore.
Mm.
Which is funny because when I was first trying my hand at novel writing, I hated it because I wasn't used to writing long text. I was used to doing more formatted writing, which is how screenwriting is, and that's why it's much harder in terms of, if you were to do the opposite, or if you started as a novelist and then jumped to screenwriting, it's much harder because screenwriting is more about being formulaic and only showing visual as opposed to emotion.
Interesting. Yeah, I've always admired those people who could write a good screenplay. We've had a couple of people on the show here that could write screenplays. I've never even tried my hand at it.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about screenwriting is that because it's only visual, you have to really rely on the production team and the actors to really show the best version of what's on paper.
Mm-hmm. You want to promote Verwayne Greenhow's next Audible book that he's got posted over here on Twitter, and then play a commercial after that?
Sure.
It says, my 26th Audible book just became available, The Salvation of Wally Thompson. It's a true 30-minute story. It's only $3.98. It's The Salvation of Wally Thompson, a short story by Verwayne Greenhow. It's an Audible.
All right. Get over there and grab a copy. And this is a commercial for Ellie Cullen's Greek Mythology series.
Ooh.
Hi, young adults. I'm author Ellie Collins. Check out my first 3 novels from my Mythology series where Greek goddesses help us teens resolve problems from bullying to relationships. Now in print, digital, or audiobooks with music and sound effects. Book 1 is Daisy Bold and Beautiful.
After a moment or two of silence, laughter filled the room, and students quickly began comparing notes on who had read the directions and who had fallen for the trick. DJ shared a smile with Hudson, as they both belonged to the Figured It Out group.
Book 2 is Miley in the Mirror.
Sam shot a cocky grin in Miley's direction. She didn't want him getting the idea she was fangirling on him or anything, and run the risk of future game invitations.
Mad Max and Sweet Sarah is the new 3rd book, so we're still producing the audiobook version. Go to freshinkgroup.com or your favorite retailer to learn more and order now.
Yeah, and I am hard at work on the production side of the 3rd audiobook she spoke about, Mad Max and Sweet Sarah. And hopefully that'll be a month or so down the road. We'll have that done. But we got this voiceover artist that's just, I mean, he's fantastic. Yeah, he's a professional. This guy's an actual actor, and so lending his talents to this book is kind of cool. But now, Andre, your childhood, reading and were you a reader and writer as a child, and what's this about losing your love for reading?
For my childhood, I think I was 10 when I first started really reading, and French is my first language, so the first book I read in terms of fantasy or fiction was Harry Potter. I read the French version of the first Harry Potter book.
Cool.
Yeah. Not a lot of people know that. They say that my English is actually quite clear, but I'm still learning a lot about the English language.
Yeah, you sound fine to me. I would have figured that was your first language.
Yeah, no, I was raised to speak only French at home, and I picked up English by myself.
Okay, well, you did a pretty good job with it.
Yeah. So Harry Potter was what made me fall in love with reading. It's the first series that made me read more than, just a few pages without stopping, and I saw the magic of storytelling through that. And for the longest time, I wasn't really diversifying my my library of books. But once life started to evolve and change and whatnot, my taste became more diverse. As for your second question, I lost my love of reading after I saw the reality of the competitiveness of being a screenwriter. So once I lost motivation for that, I went down the rabbit hole of YouTube videos, which is where I started to just neglect my reading and just didn't really care. But when I went back to school to turn my associates in creative writing to a bachelor's and had to read books for certain classes, whether they were technical or just fiction, that's what reignited the flame for reading. And I was really grateful for that because I used to love reading so much, and the fact that I just stopped due to lack of creative motivation was disheartening to me. So the fact that as a foundation of knowledge reignited that flame was a gift to me.
Yeah, all right. I love reading, but these days I don't have a lot of free time to do reading because I got so many things going on right now. But I've been a reader since I could first start reading, going back to kindergarten. I mean, it was. Yeah. I read Where the Wild Things Are. That was the first book I ever checked out of the library, and I've been hooked since.
The short story I keep reading over and over is Microwave Directions.
Yeah.
So, or how to cook a Pop-Tart.
Yeah.
Now, Joe Conjal has an interesting question here on Twitter for you, Andre. He says, just curious, is your inner dialogue in French or English? That's a good question.
Oh. No, I'd say English because I guess because of my curiosity of the English language, it's kind of like I'm practicing dialogue in my head. Because when it comes to storytelling, dialogue has always been my weakness because it's so hard to make sure each character is unique in their own way of speaking. So when I'm thinking in my own head, I'm not just thinking of my own thoughts. I'm actually fictionalizing alternative possibilities to certain situations that I was in. So I'm like, I'm refining what other possible reactions I could have had to another person that has a different way of thinking and talking.
Yeah, dialogue is my favorite thing to write. I hear the conversations in my head, and I just go from there. Now, Verwayne Greenhow, he says, I've had 2 Audible short stories clear ACX Tech this week, both true, both heart-wrenching and heartwarming. The Salvation of Wally Thompson is a 30-minute story, and 21 minutes is a 19-minute story. And he's got promo codes if you want one. So get over to Verwayne Author on Twitter and hit him up for some of them promo codes and get yourself some some audio books.
So Andre, where did you go to school?
I went to Kwantlen Polytechnic University.
Right. Where is that? I mean,
that in Surrey, BC. So basically between where I live and then Vancouver. Okay.
And you've also had other kinds of education, non-traditional education?
Yeah, it's just little things here and there. So when I finished my associate's degree and saw that I needed a career change from screenwriting, I went to school for personal trainer. So for the gyms kind of thing. So what was quite the journey for me, even though it was just a 6-week program. I started that program 4 days after my mom passed away.
Okay.
So imagine working full time and going to school on the weekends and grieving the loss of a parent. So that's what was quite challenging, to keep a level head while I go through that and, not losing focus. In fact,
I was going to say, how did you stay focused with that going on?
Honestly, I think because there was so little time for me to sit and reflect on the grieving process, that I used whatever motivation I had to just put it into continuing to move, whether I'm numb through it or not. So what was so hard, though, is the end, where I had to take the final test to be certified. I had to take the test like 5 times because of my mental focus. And what was painful is I had to pay $200 CAD, or Canadian currency, every time that I retook the test. That's how motivated I was and how invested I was into really trying to make something of myself. But what I quickly realized when I started to not just apply for work, by getting work, if you don't know how to really sell who you are, not just as a personal trainer, but as a person, it's very hard to make a living like that. So having that kind of perseverance and really trying to make something work that isn't working is what made me realize that I still wanted a creative path for a career. So that's what made me, well, actually not quite right away, because after I gave up on personal training, I took a job at a glass factory where I was a glass breaker, then a tempered heating glass helper, and then insulated glass helper for windows. But I had already applied for school while I was working, so I thought it was actually kind of good timing when I got let go, due to them not being good on timing on fixing their machines, in which they lost clientele, so they had to let go a lot of the new people, including me. But that's basically the only schooling I had, other than a coaching course for martial arts and a concussion course.
Concussion course, huh?
Concussion
yeah,
course.
because it wasn't really talked about during karate tournaments, but because of the whole, parents want to make sure that their kid is not being, treated like a rag doll in the ring, they implemented this new, I wouldn't say, that's a new requirement that anyone who does any coaching for their students has to take a concussion course and coaching course, so that if their student gets knocked out or hit in the head too hard, they know how to assess the situation. And even if they were like a corner judge, they know how to help and assess the situation.
Cool. Okay. Any future plans to go back to school to pick up some other knowledge?
Well, I have this vision where the day that I do become a full-time author, there are certain hobbies that I want to start picking up so that I can, diversify my creativity and capability, and just see what I'm capable of doing. I've always wanted to take singing lessons, piano lessons, learn how to paint, all these kinds of arts that have always fascinated me, but I just never had the time to do them. So that's the kind of education I'm talking about. I mean, I have thought about getting my master's in creative writing, but whenever I talk to universities about the guaranteed outcome of that kind of program, they said it's not like a medical program where you become a doctor. It's very uncertain. So I'd rather just leave my writing the way it is in terms of education, and whatever freedom of time I have in the future, I'll use it for the more creative outlets.
Cool. Beem, you want to roll an ad?
Sure. We are going to we've been talking about it, so let's do Eerie Charms of the Short Story by Patricia A. Guthrie.
Lucifer loses his day job, so he starts his own gig. A little girl's tantrum destroys her toys, but will they lash out in revenge? Can a miserable housewife find a new life for herself in a tear-stained old painting? Eerie charms of the short story, fantasy, mystery, and horror includes a snake deciding the fate of the world, a slot machine choosing life's winners and losers, a malevolent fairy dancing men to their deaths, a couple desperate to escape a train station, the dog show judge facing death, and more great tales. Proudly published by Fresh Ink Group, Eerie Charms is available worldwide in jacketed hardcover, softcover, and all ebook formats. Patricia A. Guthrie offers a cauldron of eerie delights that will please, delight, and yet terrify you.
Yeah, but not terrify you that much. There's a little bit of humor in some of that stuff that she writes, and get over to Amazon and grab a copy. You're a fan of short stories because Patricia knows how to write them. So there you go. Stephen?
So, Andre, are you married? You got kids, grandkids, great-grandkids? You 19 years old? What's going on with your family?
I got none of that. Just biological family. Just my dad, my sister, and a lot of relatives in Cairo, Egypt.
Cairo.
Cairo.
So what's the connection to Cairo?
Cairo is where all of my dad and mother's family live, and all their, former childhood friends and everyone that was in the choir and whatnot. That's the connection there.
You ever been there?
Oh yeah, of course. We ever since I think the first time I went there was I was just 1 year old. We go there, not anymore, but we went every 3 years or so because it was just always such a cost to travel that far. And of course my parents always had to book time off for the summer. So yeah, every 3 or 2 years, and then things kind of slowed down with life changing and becoming more busy and expensive. But every time we went, it was always such fun because the thing about the culture of Egypt in terms of how much things cost there, people would buy these beach houses in the past because it was really cheap, and they would just have it as a secondary house. It's not nothing lavish. It's just something close to the seas over there, like Mediterranean Sea, the Red Sea, Dead Sea, all these beautiful bodies of water. And so every time we went there, we would go to our relatives' little beach houses there and just soak up the sun.
I've always wanted to visit. I remember back in the 70s when King Tut's Treasures toured the U.S. And I remember when I was in 7th grade, I guess that would have been 78 or 79, we did a whole semester in school on Egyptology and just learning all about ancient Egypt and then modern Egypt. And I just always wanted to go visit, see the pyramids, see the city, see Cairo, just kind of soak up the culture.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of culture there. I mean, it's one of those places where if you're a tourist, you can't go by yourself because if you're really foreign to how things work there, it can be very easy to be, I guess, not manipulated, but if you don't understand the difference between certain things, it could cost you more or less. So, for example, taxis, I don't quite remember the colors, but if there's a taxi without a meter, the driver tells you how much you have to pay him, regardless of how much it actually is per kilometer or mile. And then if you take the cab with the meter, that's the one that you take, so that you don't get schemed into paying more.
That's always good to know.
So that's why my dad always said whenever we were crossing streets, never put your hand up like you're hailing a cab because they're very hungry to get as many clients as they can. The thing that was a culture shock to me the most, though, is the traffic, because there are no street lights, at all or any stopping points. They actually have purposely built U-turn islands so that you can just loop to another part of the capital or going to another neighborhood, because they all look the same. So you really have to understand the layout of the whole place and possibly know someone that lives there, because unless you've lived and breathed that capital, you won't know where you're going.
Interesting.
Have you written any stories set over there?
No, but I have used certain parts of the culture and my experiences of being there. So, for example, when my sister and I were at the Mediterranean Sea, which is like about, I think, 2 to 4 hours away of the capital, we were just treading water, and we noticed that we were getting further and further away from the shore without feeling anything. And we noticed that the current was getting stronger and the waves were pulling us even faster. So once the waves got quite big, my sister and I started panicking. We tried to swim back, but we were just fighting the waves. So she says, we got to stop. So we wait until the peak of each wave would reach the max point, and then swam forward on the descent. And that's how we managed our way back to the shore. But I didn't realize that because of my imbalance due to the whole, current being strong, my foot got caught on a coral and cut open.
Ow.
So I used that experience for certain scenes in book 2 of Boone and Check.
Cool. It's always cool when you can use something from your own personal experience in a story, kind of memorialize it, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I have tons of stories that I've involved in my writing, and I started to make a series on my YouTube channel at A.G. Flitcher called Stories with A.G. Flitcher, where I talk about personal stories that inspired either the books or certain scenes and even characters.
Cool. I'm going to have to go over there and check that out. Now, we do have a caller. You guys want to take a call?
Well, if you must.
Sure. All righty. Second here. Hello, caller. Welcome to the show. You're on the air. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, guys. This is V.A. Johnson from Huntsville. How are you?
Well, hello, V.A.
I'm awesome.
Hey, y'all doing okay this evening?
Yes, we are.
I am.
Okay, I have a question for the author.
Okay.
I see that you use your initials as your pen name. I do likewise. So what was your inspiration behind using your initials instead of your full name as your pen name?
I guess it's going to sound kind of lazy. I used an author name generator where I put in my initials, and then it asks you a bunch of questions on your preference of reading and even certain last names, and it just randomly selected the word Flitcher. And because I like the sound of AG, I just wanted to tack on something that kind of flows with the first two initials, and then it just kind of came from there. My dad didn't like that at all. He's like, so my name's not going to be famous? And I'm like, no, it's not, because writing is part of who I am. It's a different persona, and I'm going to keep it that way.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't quite that methodical about why I chose my initials, but that's a real good answer. So thank you. Have a good evening.
All right. Thanks for calling.
Thanks, B.A.
Okay, bye.
Now that's interesting because I've heard of character name generators, but author name, I guess I haven't really considered that.
Well, I guess part of it too is Andre Gress sounds so formal. So, but I guess that's not really that wasn't really my motivation. I just wanted to feel like the author part of me is separate from who I am personally, from day to day. So having a pen name made me feel like I can separate my writer side from human side.
Okay.
Well, you can try.
A little too deep, but
yeah,
that's how I am.
You can try, but being a writer's like having a big hairy mole on your nose. It's always there.
So, day job. What do you? Because you mentioned when you become a full-time writer. So I take it you're not a full-time writer yet. What is your day job? How do you make money?
My day job is maintenance and trade worker at a zoo.
At a zoo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So maintenance, like when the elephant breaks down, you go over with the wrench and.
Yeah, I plug up his butt. No. Put another screw in there and see what happens.
Yeah, he's not lying.
That's a good one. No. Basically, we fix enclosures or renovate them for different animals because we have such a. Well, it's so old. It's like this zoo has been running for like 40 years. It started out as a game farm, and then we started to build up the enclosures. Like it was actually treated as an open safari. And there was like 4 people running the whole zoo. So you have like one person feeding all these animals, the other one cleaning, and the other one running the front entrance, and all this stuff. Was chaos. But once they saw the potential for it to be more than just a game farm, and actually before it was a game farm, it was a dairy farm. So it was this huge 120-acre piece of agricultural land that over time became more of a commercial business, I guess. So when I started working there, obviously I haven't been there that long, maybe like 4 or 5 years, there was a lot of change to basically give the zoo a facelift, removing all of the old, deer fencing and renovating certain enclosures to be better equipped for certain animals that have abilities to either jump really high or just have crazy strength. So the area that we always work on is what we call the cat house. The cat house is this 4 enclosure corner where around this cat house are where all the different types of big cats are in their holding pen. We have these 4 enclosures where they all kind of see each other. So whenever we have, let's say, jaguars, and they're on the opposite side of our snow leopards, they hate each other so much. They're always sizing each other up. In fact, there were times where they would actually start pulling on the fence because they felt threatened. So we always have to go back and then fix that part of the fence or reinforce it, and then double check that the hot wire is still live and working, because we have all these logs and stuff where once they get accustomed to their environment, they have the ability to jump wherever they can. So that's part of it. But the other part is because the new owner has, money, he wants it to be more commercial. So he's thinking of extending a building here, adding a restaurant there. But we always remind him of like environmental impact. So there's all of these regulations and codes that we're always thinking about. So it gets kind of boring sometimes in terms of technical stuff, but the fun part is we get to see the animals every day and, help make sure that the customers and the animals are safe.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting job. I mean, you say it gets boring at times. It sounds interesting. Break up a squabble between a jaguar and a snow leopard or whatever. Hey, you guys, back off. Chill out.
Well, if you play cards with the Tigers, they always cheat. Always. You can count on it. You can count on it from the time they deal them.
We have this male lion, Boomer. He doesn't do it anymore because of his age. But when he was still in his prime, if guests got too close to him, he would actually pee on them. He would actually like aim his thing and say, "Hey, back off."
Wow, that's a punk. Stephen, do you have a question?
Yeah, what other kinds of hobbies and interests do you have?
Well, the making YouTube videos has always been one that was like up and down, but last September I took a 2-month acting course, and I used the new skill I got from that for my videos in terms of like how I present myself in terms of confidence, because whenever I made videos I always sounded really, unsure of myself. So with that practice, I just got more confident in making as many videos as possible.
What's the name of the channel?
It's just my pen name, A.G. Flitcher.
Okay.
A.G. Flitcher. Okay.
Mhm. I used to make YouTube videos when I was still really into film. I had 2 other channels that they still exist, but I don't have access to them. The Lone Wolf 475, which was during high school, and then Short Giant Production.
All right, cool.
Beem, you want to roll another ad?
Sure thing.
I'm getting hungry.
We're getting the food truck ready. We're starting the food truck up.
With good jobs so hard to find, especially in rapidly expanding Florida, owning your own food truck could be the best option. It's the least expensive startup, and you can be fully operational in mere months. The rules and regulations can be a bit complex, and no single source has offered all the answers. Until now. How to Start and Run Your Own Food Truck Business in Florida by food truck veteran A.K. Wingler is the step-by-step guide that takes you from good idea to great success. Sure, it's hard work, but exciting, mobile, flexible, and highly profitable. And you get to be your own boss and set your own hours. Proudly published by Fresh Ink Group, this book tells you how and where to make money in this exploding independent industry. Grab your copy in laminated hardcover, glossy softcover, or any of the major ebook formats at retailers worldwide. Even if you're just curious for now, this guide is the best way to discover if a food truck business is right for you.
Yes, indeed. We are on with author A.G. Flitcher, and if you would like to talk to him, you can give us a call at 516-453-9902. There are a couple more comments here on Twitter. Marlena Smith, she's a writer. She's down in Alabama. She says, "You write and work at a zoo? Talk about dream work."
We bought a zoo.
We bought a zoo. I wrote a book about it. And Joe Conjal, he's coming back in here with another comment on, he says, "I get why writers use pen names, but for me, I've always figured since I put the sweat and work into the story, I want my actual name on it. It's not about any fame for me. It's just the satisfaction of seeing my name on the finished product. Just my thoughts on that." And that's a good thought. Now, if your name is Stephen King and you're not the guy that wrote The Shining, you can't use that name.
Yeah.
You know that's your real name. And that's the case with some of us. So, but yeah, I mean, I understand that, what Joe's saying.
I've always wanted to meet Stephen King. He's one of my idols when it comes to writing.
Yeah, he's a good storyteller. I've read a ton of his books.
I had to read the book, or I chose to read the book, for my graduation class for creative writing, and that was a crazy challenge for me because I had to read that book in 7 weeks. So while I'm taking 4 classes, and I think I was kind of working at that time too. I was reading like 60 to 100 pages a day just to keep up. While I'm still doing homework and keeping up with a diverse number of classes that I took. And when I told the class that the book was 1,132 pages, they were like, how did you even like digest everything in such a little amount of time? I'm like, well, the thing about Stephen King, even though he is a very tedious writer, it's never boring. It's not like he's boring you for 100 pages and then you're like, well, that was kind of pointless. He chooses his information dumps carefully. That it's not treated as an info dump. It's to connect the dots that the main characters don't see, but that is important for the reader.
Yeah, he's got an interesting way he speaks. It's one of my favorite lines, and I can't remember the story it's from, but he says, talking about these guys, these bad characters, and the narrator's saying they were darker than a carload of assholes. I just thought that was a great line.
So, Andre, tell us about your books. You started out with duology and then worked your way up to the Boone and Jacques series. You want to tell us about duology?
Sure. The duology is titled Unforgiven, which I submitted for an award called Literary Titan. Unforgiven is about a character named Henry Fields, who used to be a writer, then became a book editor, and then loses his job, and then receives this letter or this will from his so-called supposed deceased father. And in the will it says that he has the deed to his cabin. So he goes on a road trip with his dog, and because it was during winter time, his car spins out and falls into a ditch that somehow was not that far from the cabin. And the story just kind of unravels from there. He finds out all these secrets about his family and what they did for money, and how they were able to afford certain things, and that they wanted him to be part of something that he didn't want to be part of. It was something that I just kind of came up with. Someone asked me once, how long did it take for me to write my first book, which was Unforgiven Part 1? And I told them about a month, and they thought that was crazy. I'm like, well, it's only 84 pages long. But they said, yeah, but that was their first time writing before even taking classes on fiction writing. So people were always surprised by that. For the Boone and Jacques series, that was much later. The duology I wrote was written in 2016, and then Boone and Jacques was written in 2019 for the first book, which is completely different from the duology. Boone and Jacques is my first fantasy series, which I treated more as a split genre of fantasy and fiction. It collected dust for like a year or two. No one really noticed it or about it. But once I started to change my approach to not just how I talk about it, but who I talk to in terms of the target audience. And the target audience, I noticed as the story continued to develop, was actually LGBTQ, because the characters, when they were just children, they had no idea what their sexual orientation was and who they are as people. But as they get older, they discover a lot about themselves. And I wanted to really go against the grain for a lot of things in this series. I tackle a lot of subjects that most beginner authors would either be stepping away from or tiptoeing on how they can bring that in without upsetting anyone. So although I was tasteful and respectful about certain subjects, I still didn't censor myself. So, for example, Jacques, who is a foster child, who is from a French family and then fostered by a British family, is pansexual. But he doesn't know that about himself until, I think, the end of book 3. I won't say how, but the readers will just have to pick up that book. Boone is straight, but very open-minded, so he didn't bat an eye when he found out about Jack's newfound part of himself. Shammy, who is currently Boone's wife when he is an adult, is bisexual, but same thing. She didn't know that about herself till book 2. So that's kind of the characters that I can describe to you. But as for on the surface, the series is about Boone and Jack discovering magical history in their town, Saddleton, that they live in, and later on discovering that Saddleton is not the only town that is involved in magic.
Now, you had talked about duology being 80-some-odd pages. Are these longer books? Boone and Jacques?
Sorry?
Boone and Jacques, are they longer than the duology books?
Oh, yeah. Boone and Jacques, the series, is 5 books long.
Okay. But page-wise,
sorry. Okay. Yeah. The duology was 84 pages and then 276 pages for book 2. Boone and Jacques averages between, I have the books right here, 430 pages to, I think, 450.
Oh, okay. So those are good-sized books then.
Yep.
Now, how long did it... Go ahead.
Book 2 is the shortest.
Okay. How long did it take you to write each of these?
6 to 8 months, including production.
Okay, that's a good run.
Yeah, people say that that's crazy because I only write twice a week. So I'm writing 2 to 4 hours a day on my days off, averaging on 5,000 words a week. So
that's a good word count per week.
Yeah.
Do you think this series is also getting into a young adult audience as well?
The first book, yeah, but I wrote it in a way that it wouldn't really be considered YA because I didn't want the readers to feel limited in terms of age demographic. It's more of genre interest. Okay. I actually have more adult readers than I have young readers. So that means that there's a lot of adult subject matter, which is why a lot of the reviews you see online say that although the book is really fun and reminds readers of their childhood, there's also a lot of darkness in the story.
So you self-publish these. Is that right? You self-publish these?
Yes.
And how do you do your covers?
For covers, I just hire an illustrator, same one for the first and second one, and different illustrator for the third one. And in terms of how I find them, I just went on different sites like ArtStation or DeviantArt, and even Instagram. But I'm very picky about who I choose because it has to fit the tone of the book and not be a distraction. Like when you pick up the book and you start reading it, it doesn't feel jarring in terms of the image matching what you're about to read.
Yeah, it's the covers, quite important, because that's the first thing that your readers are going to see.
Yeah.
And so, you as the writer, you've got to have that final say in, does this represent the story?
Yeah, that's why on Instagram I have to be very careful because there's a lot of very enthusiastic, not just artists, but artists that haven't done that before, that haven't actually done book illustrations before, and they always want to, ring me up and say, hey, I can do this for you if you want. I'm like, yeah, but it's not the same thing as doing a painting or digital art, because you have to have some kind of understanding, not just of how the artwork's supposed to look, but also where do you place titles, and how do you match the font, and how much of the blurb on the back cover has to be placed, and does it match the tone of the book in terms of the font that you use, and are you okay with having text on your art? That's the one thing I had an issue with these people, where they're like, but I want my art to shine. I'm like, that's nice, but that's not what I want.
Yeah.
I want the art to complement the story, but be very clear for the person who's picking up the book or looking at it online, because they're not looking at just the art, they're looking at the title to make sure that it's being washed out by the backdrop, and that the back cover doesn't spoil too much for them, but also still shows the overall energy of the book.
Are you getting any fan reaction or feedback from the books?
Oh yeah, constantly. I have this one, a couple people that say that I have a very good sense of setting and detail. So that's always a compliment to me, that at least my progression in how I do that part of storytelling is getting stronger and still keeping people's attention, and that whatever reviewer reads the book has a positive reaction to my stories.
Okay.
So what's this about a romance scam with Sonia?
Yeah. Now that's a story. So back in August 2021, I signed up for online dating, and this woman supposedly called Sonia Daniels starts talking to me, and we hit it off. And then a few days later, we exchanged numbers, start talking, and then for some reason, they say that they'd rather talk on Google Hangouts, privacy reasons. I didn't quite understand her or whoever this person is, why they wanted that. But I was an idiot. I just got sucked in. So it got to the point where, as we got to know each other more, and they started making up excuses to not meet me because they said that I'm sick or I have this condition, I have to go to the hospital and get the surgery. Oh, now I have to go to Ontario. Now I have to go to London because my deceased father has a will for where there's an inheritance, and I have to go talk to the lawyers. And for some reason, even though these excuses sound extremely lavish and just crazy, I still bought into it. So whenever I was showing distance to this person, they would give me the whole guilt trip and actually convince me to feel guilt. So I would be at work, and whenever this person was feeling upset, I would feel guilty and would actually drop what I'm doing and try to calm her down and say sorry and whatever. So this scammer was so good at making you feel not just inferior, but feel guilty about not being in their hooks, that you just fall deeper and deeper into the hole. So when I saw that her excuses became extremely chaotic and random and very dangerous for me to be involved with this person, that's when I finally woke up and broke it off. But what was really upsetting to me is that I had my family telling me that this is not a real person and I need to walk away. And I would actually be getting mad at my family for not believing in me, that this person is real. But when this person told me that they were tagged with money laundering because they were making too big of a transaction to get their money back into their Canadian account, that's when I was like, nope, I don't want to go to jail. I'm going to walk away. So I tell this person I'm done, and I'm going to try to be as possible with this message that this person gave me. They basically said that they are not desperate for love, and they're not going to hang around and wait for me to come back to them. Because what I essentially said, to kind of play along with their game, is that the only way I'm going to continue this relationship is if you come back to BC and actually meet me. So, because they can see that, I was waking up to the reality of what was happening, they just went nuts. So I started blocking them everywhere, and instead of just leaving it alone, which is the next victim, they just kept harassing me, creating like 7, 8 fake Facebook profiles, random email changes, phone numbers, constantly emailing me and all this stuff. And every time that I would block them, they would just keep trying different things. So it was quite humiliating and insane.
Yeah,
but
and that
could be a story in there.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a novel right there.
Oh yeah, it's in book 4. In book 4, I can tell you a little bit about it because they're very small scenes and they don't really spoil the story. In the first scene, it's Jacques' half-sister, Coralie, who talks about her former lover that she never met. So one day, she's at a grocery store, and this woman with a lot of like heavy clothing is just looking at her. And Coralie kind of recognizes her, but feels real uncomfortable, so she just pays for her stuff and walks out the store. And then this hooded woman starts following her. And because she was getting really scared, she starts looking for someone to help her. And luckily, Jacques was at a fruit stand in front of her, and she waves him over to help her get to safety. So he brings her to her car quickly, and the woman that was just walking behind her starts running to the car with a knife and goes to the passenger side to try and, stop them. And then it kind of just ends there, I think. And then the second scene is a bedtime story that Boone reads to his son, Gene, where it's about this painting that he drew or painted for his son in his bedroom. The painting is this foggy, misty forest with a cabin, a pond, and a duck cuddling a dog. So the story, essentially, without saying too much of it, is the person living in the cabin is this temptress that lures men to her cabin and convinces them to fall in love with her, and that basically she's like Amber Heard, where she does the whole serenading thing, pretends to be very in love with you, and then makes you feel guilty every time that you break her trust, not feel as important. And whenever these men would find the ability to leave her, she would look at the duck cuddling the dog and feel extremely jealous of their unbroken bond.
So this is the one you're working on right now?
Yeah, I'm 3/4 of the way in the second draft today.
Okay.
What will it be called?
The subtitle is Cypress Moonlight. They're living in a new town. Yeah, they're living in a new town. Boone, Jack and Shammy, and Exantia.
All right.
Well, we're going to ask you something you've never been asked before. Do you have any advice for authors out there?
Honestly, diversify your reading. Because even if you are a genre writer where you only focus on one genre, change your taste in reading to see how different narrative voices carry a reader through the book, because that to me is what really makes a book stand out. If you don't, I don't want to say change, if you don't diversify how you carry the reader from scene to scene, it becomes boring, because they have already read your work before and they want something new. It's easy at this time of life for readers to get bored, so it's important to make sure you keep them on their feet.
Yeah, and in this day and age, I mean, there's millions of other writers out there online too, so you want to be the one that stands out and not bore your audience.
Yeah, of course. I mean, what I noticed with my writing now, even though my books have gotten awards, I still see Boone and Jacques as my practice round for books I've always wanted to write. The thing about standalone novels is that because you only have one chance, like one, period of time as a storyline to hook the reader in, you have to make sure that your skills of the craft are mastered. So I took Boone and Jacques as this chance to really explore my skills and what I'm going to write in the future. I already have like 10, 15 books planned ahead of time.
Cool. So how can people find you on social media? Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, blog?
So just keep the word E.G. Flitcher in your head and go on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, and just type that in and you'll find me.
All right. A.G. Flitcher.
And, of course, if anybody's trying to get a hold of A.G. Flitcher and can't find another way to do it, we've got a contact form at freshinkgroup.com. We will put you in touch.
Yes, indeed.
All right.
It's been a hoot having you on, A.G. Flitcher, and learning about your books. And definitely the Boone and Jacques series sounds really cool. So everybody should be checking those out.
Yeah.
Thank you. One last thing I forgot to mention. In June, on the 25th, I'm going to be at an author conference for a contest that I'm a finalist in, which is the Ozma Award, which is for the fantasy series, orchestrated by Chanticleer Reviews.
Cool.
And where will you be on the 25th?
Yeah.
It's a virtual conference, at least for me.
Okay.
I couldn't afford to be there in person. It's at Bellingham, Washington, at one of their hotels over there. Anyway, what was so cool about this contest, I submitted my entire series for this award back in September, and I didn't hear anything for like 8 months. Then out of nowhere, I'm told that I'm one of 2 people that's in the finals for a fantasy series. So I was really excited about that.
Well, keep us up to date on that, and we'll promote the heck out of it if you become the winner, and we'll promote it even if you don't. So keep us up to date on that.
Yep, everything else, send a note to Sam at freshinkgroup.com and let him know to put it in the newsletter, too.
Yeah.
Will do.
So,
all right.
Next week, we've got retired school teacher, Vermonter Betty A. Stevens. She has several cool books, and we've known Betty for a lot of years, and we're really looking forward to having her on the show. And then
Indeed.
after that, somebody we haven't known for any amount of years.
May 25th, we've got Jason Glenn. He reached out to us, and he's got some cool stuff out there. He's another writer, so tune in for that one.
Now, the week of June 8th, we're both going to be doing some traveling, so we're going to run an encore of the Karen Ingalls, and she had her friend Carol Tucker on that show. Karen Ingalls and Carol Tucker. That's June 8th. It'll be an encore of an earlier episode. it's mainly about her releasing the book, learning about autism. Carol was a woman who raised an autistic child and really shared a lot of experiences and useful tips and ideas.
Yeah, and she started a school too, so she's knowledgeable in that area. On June 15th, we're going to have the return of Mary Schmidt. She was on before. She writes all kinds of different stuff, from memoirs to children's series. So tune in for that. Mary's always a good, fun guest, and you don't want to miss that one.
Yep. So thanks again, A.G. Flitcher. It was a treat having you on the show. We look forward to talking to you again soon, and wish you luck on your next book.
Thank you for having me. I had a blast.
All right.
Keep us up to date when the new book's coming out as well, and we'll promote that as well. So.
Yep. Now,
Beem, book 4 should be out sometime in the summer.
Okay.
Cool. All right, Beem, you want to roll Whoopie on the way out?
We will throw some Whoopie's bacon on the grill.
Every person has a private life and a secret self. This is true of those we know and people we only know because they are famous. Discover fascinating, intimate, clever, witty, poignant, insightful tales from a diverse roster of notable women who dare reveal both the unknown and the previously undisclosed. But these are not gossipy tales. No, they are personal, anecdotal, always meaningful stories for quiet reading, sharing aloud, even performing from the stage. Compiled by Detroit playwright Jay Ajluni, Whoopi Likes Her Bacon Crispy, 65 fascinating excerpts from the memoirs of famous and infamous women, is illustrated with whimsical portraits that capture these remarkable celebrities at their best. Choose your own from laminate hardcover, softback, and digital editions, all proudly published by Fresh Ink Group. Come away with a richer appreciation of these talented women, and smile for permitting them to entertain you in unexpected and delightful ways.
You've been a part of Voice of Indie, a production of Fresh Ink Group. Spread the word, support our guests, then find us at freshinkgroup.com and be sure to hashtag Fresh Ink Group.